welcome.
Thank you.
The rest of our conversation this evening will be in English, which may be a relief. Forgive my pronunciation. We have around 30 minutes on stage conversation, and then I'll be asking you for your questions for our speakers tonight. If you are the kind of person who prefers to join a conversation online instead of in the room, the hashtag for this evening is China in Context Fest. I can see many of you want to take pictures. That's lovely. No flash, please. And while you're raising your camera over your head, could you please think about the person behind you? Thank you. Now, it is just a joy to have you with us this evening.
Thank you for bringing me here.
When we were having a conversation earlier, and Yan Laoshi has been incredibly kind and met with lots of people to do various media interviews before she's up here being interviewed by me and then by you. And I asked you, it must be exhausting. And you said, not as exhausting as writing. Tell me more about the routine that you have for honing the craft of writing.
Writing novel, I can do it in my own pace, but writing for screenplay, for the directors or for the producers, sometimes they give me deadlines, so I have to complete certain numbers of words a day. And I'm a very impatient person. I don't like to work on the same project, drag it for a year or something. I just want to get it done. So I bring big load of work over myself. That's why I think it's very exhausting. Nothing compared with writing is as exhausting.
So how do you maintain your energy while you're really in the midst of creating a novel or working on one of those screenplays?
I think now I have to admit that people are born with a different energy level. I think I'm a very energetic person, and I also swim every other day to 2,000 meters, which help me mentally. I think how much mental energy you spend equally, generated by your body energy spent.
Mm-hmm. And while you're writing, are there particular habits or routines that work for you? So the daily swim is clearly very important. Is there something about your working environment, or do you prefer to write using a computer or on paper or dictation? What works for you?
I used to write in longhand. I cannot think and wait for the computer make mistakes and correct them, pick words. But after I got into this awful job of writing for directors, and you have to put this paragraph to there, and a dialogue take off and rewrite, and use a pen and a paper seems too much mess. So it's much cleaner to write on computer. So then I switched to writing on computer. Now many collectors ask to collect my manuscript. They think, since somebody sold my letters to my mother online, so all kinds of things can make money. So some collectors start to get keen on collecting my manuscript. But unfortunately, I only write with a pencil, which you cannot keep for a long time.
Somebody sold the letters that you wrote to your mother?
And also my mother's letters to other people. I don't know how they got it.
My goodness. The world is an unusual place. We learn more about it each day. Some writers use very specific techniques to develop their plot and characters, and the characters in your books are particularly rich. Sometimes when I finish the novels, I feel as though I've left a friend behind. Tell me more about how those characters are shaped. I'm curious about the technical skill in developing something that feels so real when a reader like me absorbs it.
When I'm with a group of people, I'm always the quiet one. I just get my reader of listening and observing and perception turn it on, and I observe. Since I was a young child, I was that way. I was very quiet, expressionless. Just people think I'm not doing anything, but I'm observing. So very dangerous friend to have. And I joined army at age 12. In the army place, male dominated, and you better watch out to survive. So all kinds of people, all bigger than me, all older than me, from every part of China they came from. And if you don't, read them well, you have to read their body languages. And if you don't read them well, you might get in trouble. So, and that's how I survived, and I became such a person with a strong sixth sense. So that's why my perception is very, very sharp, very sensitive, and that's why I sort of, once I see this person and had dialogue with him, then I kind of, in my mind, I draw a picture or some kind of portrait of this person. Then over these years and required by my writing, then I do it consciously. And I tried to, when I write about how this woman looks or man looks, I go back to all the collections of portraits, and I will describe how he looks, and then it becomes more vivid than just use your rack your mind and trying to describe.
So they're almost people that you've met or seen, or you're drawing together all those things all the time, every day.
Sometimes I think you sit in a restaurant or in a cafe, and with this indirect company of other people, you can do much better job. Because you are it's like a hidden eyes, hidden camera.
Watch out, audience. You might recognize yourself a little later in a future creation. Only if you're very lucky. Your books often involve a great deal of research. I'm thinking of Little Aunt Crane in particular, which involved you traveling to Japan and really understanding a great deal about history. How do you plan and prepare for that kind of research trip, and how does the research feed into your creative work?
I have heard this story years, decades ago, and I just thought this story is so fascinating. A Chinese young girl hidden within a Chinese community, Chinese family, gave birth to Chinese family's kids, and finally got reviewed as Japanese. I think this is a so interesting and fascinating story. But I don't know how to write a Japanese woman. I think if it's a very sharp difference, it may be easy to write. But the subtle difference, although we are all Orientals, but the subtle difference between us, that makes us Chinese and Japanese. And so fortunately, we had this film producer. Larry also knows we often mimic her. You know, she is very quiet, very soft spoken person. No, sorry, but her but always follows her sorry, you know, because she wants to insist something, then she always says, sorry, but. So we call her sorry, but.
So we're not going to say her name.
Yeah. So then we by observing her for years, for maybe 2 to 3 years, doing this unsuccessful film production, I sort of know this kind of. But she is so modern. She studied in London. And then I still couldn't get the grab on how different the Chinese and the Japanese women are. And until I told this story to a TV producer, and he said, I buy the right now. I'll draft the contract when I go back. So the contract was sent to me, and the money was there, and the money was good back then. So I said, okay, so now I'm rich enough to go to Japan. So I have a very good friend who also worked and lived in Japan, a woman friend, and Larry also learned some Japanese, and so we made a team. We went to Japan, and we found this the village that had sent half of the village to Manchuria to colonize. Yes, actually they just grabbed the land from Chinese maybe landlords or Chinese farmers.
She said colonized.
Yeah. So then we found out lots of background. You know, I only know this half of the story. Then I knew how they got sent, these young girls, how they got, their families, how they went to the northeast of China, and how they retreated, and how many people died on the route of retreating. It's very, very, it's much broader and deeper story than I first originally heard. Then I saw this innkeeper's wife. Okay, she was still in a traditional Japanese outfit, and she never going out of this dining room, we are sitting on a around a small table, and she goes out, her back toward the door, and then she was, reversing like that. So, and her back is so expressive. So I thought, then I felt like, I can maybe write this Japanese woman. So that was the moment I got the shiver of inspiration. Then I went back. Then we went to Okinawa together, and I saw the pictures of these 2,500 or some the young female students who served the army, the very cruel wars, and they couldn't sleep for 7 days, and afterward they were told that the American soldiers are going to rape you to death, so many of them committed suicide. The youngest was 15, and from all this, then I started to cry. I sort of understand this, the spirit of Japanese women. And then when I went back and I started to write this, it was, finally I wrote, it was published, and a Japanese translator who wrote to me that Tatsuro, this young Japanese girl, Dohe, feels so much like Japanese too, very authentic. So I thought, hey, it's a big victory.
Should mention, she also interviewed a number of women who came back to Japan from Manchuria, who'd been in there till a very advanced age.
So we've heard a bit more about the research, and you described that shiver of inspiration, which is such a lovely phrase, and the mental kind of habit that you have of absorbing the people in your environment and using them, applying what you've seen to create the characters. Lawrence and Nicky, I'd be really interested to hear what craft and routine comes into... Oh, thank you, Siri. What skill and routine goes into your work in translating? How does that happen?
How long have you got?
Well,
no, it's all right. I'll keep it really succinct. As a translator, especially as a translator from a language which is very different from English, you really do have to recreate, but at the same time you have a hugely heavy responsibility to recreate exactly what the author created. So it's like walking a tightrope the whole time. And there are all sorts of different factors. I mean, you start with the absolute basic, the syntax, the grammar, the language itself, understanding it. Then you've got cultural references, historical references. Then you get to the fun bit, which is the style of your author. And somehow you've got to create a style which is recognizable, and yet it's going to be different because it's in English, not in Chinese. So, I mean, I think one important thing is you really have to give yourself enough time, and you have to do like one draft and then be prepared to do the number of drafts that it takes. And the very last thing you do is you have to read the English by itself, preferably, if you're very lucky and you've got enough time left, having left a decent interval of time, because that's when you really pick up things that, well, you could have sworn you'd done it right, but goodness, it sounds really odd. Was it actually? And then you may have to go back to the original and say, maybe I wasn't right in that. So, I mean, it just about covers every possible aspect of the language. You've got to really be master, mistress of your own language. You've got to love your own language as much as the source language. And well, I believe you're going to talk a bit about emotions and personal feelings. That's a minefield, because you really have to get that right. So I'll save my comment on that until later.
Nicky's covered it very well, I think. What I would add to it in my own process, one thing that has revolutionized my translation is iPad and a program called Plico, where you can read the text into there, the electronic text, and it has about 18 dictionaries built in. I keep buying them every time they come out with new ones, including Buddhism, medicine, military, whatever it might take for the particular work. So you can go through and you can see that. It used to be when she started out, she would write for Taiwan publications. That would be published then in traditional Chinese characters. I would then look them up either by Bopomofo or Wade Giles system. And then I would find what it said in the pronunciation. Then I find it means absolutely nothing, what she said, because it's a Taiwan dictionary and it's a mainland, so I'd go and look it up in a mainland dictionary. Now not necessary, now much faster. Generally, what I tend to do is go through with the iPad and write a draft translation. Sometimes the syntax and the grammar come easily. Other times I will put in several equivalents and such. And then if it's really a mess at the end, I'll put in brackets, fix, and come back to it later. And go through that. And I think I leave the Chinese a little earlier maybe than Nicky is describing in her process. I find I first would need to go through with a red pen. And some things that I just couldn't figure out at the time when looking at the Chinese make sense to me when I look at the English. And say, why didn't I think of that before? Of course, because half the brain was focused in Chinese. And then I'll go through it and occasionally keeping the characters and such aside to keep myself honest. Then I'll go through another draft over that, usually with typing, then on top of the corrected handwritten draft, and then go over the typewritten draft and correct that again, and then maybe do one more polish, and then in the end show it to Gilling and see if I'm on the right track or not. A lot of things are delayed sometimes to go in to find out what was this, Joiba, the Mukden Marco Polo Bridge incident, fine, that's well understood. Incidents in Shanghai I didn't know about, so I had to go and research that a little more heavily. Certain cultural references, literary references anyway, one can go on, and I'll stop it right about there, but it is indeed a process.
Thank you. And Gerling, what does it feel like to review the voice that somebody has created on your behalf in another language?
I'm by nature, I'm a very gullible person, When I watch a movie based on my novel or I wrote the screenplay, I thought, wow, this is fun. It's like so objective. I'm like one member of the audience. I can forget about this is my work. So when I read, first time I read Larry's translation of my novella White Snake, I went to the tears. Wow, this story is so touching, so heart-wrenching. So then I forget about checking,
Who's
things.
the author?
Yeah. So I think and also every day I'm busy about other new writings. In China, if I sold one of my novels to some producers, and 3 months after, I went back and said, "Have you found a screenplay writer yet?" And no. We are finding somebody. And a half year later, I asked, "Have you found anybody to write this script yet?" No. Then 3 years later, I asked, "You haven't found a? Please, can you write it?" Oh my God! Kick the back to me. So almost like that. So according to Larry said that when you have something urgent to get done, you go to a busy person. He has jobs piled up, but don't go to a person who is, at leisure, idle. He's idle for a reason, So I'm always a busy person. I'm cursing and every day I'm such a. 我说，这么中国的编剧都死绝了，怎么回事？都找不到一个人呢。
Have all the Chinese scriptwriters died out?
That's why I just have very little time for translation.
Yeah, 1.4 billion people, and only one screenwriter can be found. Go figure.
Give everything to a busy person. Now, your background before you became a novelist and a screenplay writer, your background is extraordinary. You talked about joining the army age 12, and then you worked as a war correspondent. Tell us a little bit more about how those experiences feed your creative work now.
I think it not only changed my career, switched my career from dancing to writing. It also changed me. I think I used to believe heroism. Believe in one should die for his country. Yeah, maybe it is true. But after you see all these young soldiers with the limbs bombed off, so much blood they lost, and so many of them died on the operation tables. It's just I forever had become the peacemaker, peace advocate. And after I went to the U.S. and my classmates, schoolmates, went on a demonstration against the Gulf War, so I participated, and after years after that, people in San Francisco did the vigil with candles in hand, singing, give peace another chance, right?
Give peace a chance.
Yeah, and I
Iraq
participated.
War.
So I just, for the Iraq, but the following morning we heard that the war broke out. Yeah, it was unfortunately. But I think then dancing is so, it's too limited. You know, it limited me from what I really want to tell the world, to say, to what I think. So I think, no, that's my past. I have to become someone who has, who can use her mind better, who can express what she thinks better. So then I become a writer. Of course, if I had not been prepared by my father with his excellent genes for a free thinker, and also for the library he had during my childhood, and we had nothing, not so many toys, but books. Books you could freely read. You could just read and drop and pick something else. My father was totally, freestyle of raising us. I could read pornography. He didn't care. So I had been prepared to this important, crucial switch.
And how does living in a different culture, you live in Germany now, how does living in a different culture affect the way that you think or write about Chinese characters or Chinese life?
I think it's great. It feels great to be an outsider and to be a how to say, marginal person. I like to be marginal person. I don't want to get into mainstream, boring, no drama, nothing. You can predict. But for marginal people, you might have a change. You might have a surprise waiting for you just at the turn of the corner. So I think and I live in many countries. I cannot take anything for granted. This is great. You always you're so fresh. You feel isolated. You feel you are always receiving a message and information than what you express. So I think this. If I live in this country too long and made too many friends, I have to leave because too many people will come to bother me. And so I move around and I'm forever a marginal person. And even though my base and the place and the people I write was far away, my homeland. That's something nobody can take from me. So that I can take granted.
Thank you. I'm curious about how easy it is for you as translators to recognize when you're dealing with personal experience or something that might draw from a personal story, or when you're very clearly in the realms of Gerling's imagination. Can you tell the difference while you're doing it, and how does it being personal experience affect the way in which you translate it?
I think you're better prepared.
Well, I must say I didn't, because I've translated your Jinling Shi San Chai, which was translated, the title was translated as Flowers of War. I did not see you in any of those characters. So that didn't really arise. I mean, I think a good novel reads like a good novel, and whether the author has written their own lives into the novel, sometimes you can't tell, and sometimes that's degree of their skill. I mean, I have translated two authors who've written a lot about their own personal experiences. Both of them were fairly painful, and I actually, I think one was Shinran's Letter to an Unknown Mother, and Shinran said to me at the end, I was worried about you, how did you manage to deal with this material? And I thought, actually, I did it by taking myself out of it. And it was only a couple of years later when I reread the book, I reread my own translation, and I thought, oh God, did I really translate that? That's so distressing. If I have a book which is a little less painful, it can actually move me to tears. Doesn't happen very often. But Ping Ru and Mei Tang, which is a memoir I've just translated about a very elderly couple where the wife dies and the husband is so grief-stricken that he's created this beautiful book. His name is Rao Ping Ru. He's still alive. And actually, every time, with every draft, when I got to the final pages, I felt tears in my eyes. If it's too painful, then I just have to take myself out of it.
For Gulling's work, I find that the ones that have the most of her in it are youth, or Fanghua, and Suizi Wuyu, the Suizi stories, because that is the closest to being autobiographical. I find the opposite. Maybe the material that she has in general is not as distressing as some of the works that Nicky has worked with. I have to put myself into the emotions, because only if I go, and a good novel should do that for you. If I can put myself into the emotions of the character, then I'm able to express in my own words or in English words what that character is feeling by feeling it myself.
You are fabulous at segueing into my next question. Because I'd love us to talk about Youth a little bit more. It's about to be released on DVD here in the UK. There's probably someone in this room who knows the date precisely.
Sometime in March.
Sometime in March. There we are, precise.
Watch it on Amazon.
It's soon.
Pre-orders
it's coming.
available.
This very, very beautiful film, very moving, with elements of autobiography. Would it be fair to describe it that way? Or how would you describe the personal story that is or isn't conveyed through the film?
Oh, well, these two major characters, the male lead and female lead, are the person really based on the comrades I lived with. And of course, it's fictionalized. The Liu Feng, the hero, the Lei Feng second, was my first short story was about this person, because when he went to express his love to a girl, a singer, and she just cried. She was just think so. She was so wronged by his expression. Of course, he wasn't to get publicly criticized, but that just everybody thinks he is a saint. Why there's no single girl wants to be in a love affair with him? Then that just, I kept thinking he's not ugly, he's not, he's a very good person, was very good heart, with very deft hands, so he can make anything. And my first short story was about this soldier. Then I also wrote two short stories about this female lead, and none came to close to my expectation. I didn't really write them well, and they are just stories, but not the characters I wanted to create. So this time, when Feng Xiaogang asked me to write my experience in army performing troupe, and these two characters pop into my mind again. So this time I said, if I cannot write them well, I will give up. I'll surrender to myself. But this time, I really think I did a good job to create these two characters.
You wrote them beautifully. It's a very powerful film. What's it like? Because these are based on people, your comrades from the army. You know what that person looked like. What's it then like to watch on the big screen and see an actor who's been cast and chosen by somebody else to play a character or a person you knew and a character that you've personally created? How does that feel?
I think the director did a very good job in casting. And Huang Xuan is the right guy for a right actor for this role, and also Feng Xiaogang almost created a Wengongtuan, performing troupe in that compound, and these girls live together, and young boys, and they get trained as military personnel and also trained as performing troopers. So the almost a half year they lived like that, So the character just grew into them, and then they become, combined. They become like, very real. And after the last scene, and they really cried. They didn't want to leave the created performing troupe.
I cried rather a lot at the end of that film. But this doesn't surprise me because I'm pretty sure that I cry at the end of every single one of your books, so it's clearly a thing. It's time for us to turn this conversation over to the audience, so I'm going to ask someone to come and collect some microphones ready for the audience, please. And where do we have some questions? Well, we have a lady in red right over here who is ready. I'm going to relinquish my microphone.
Hello, Madam Yan. Welcome to London. And I read a few of your books. And like yourself, I was also born and bred in mainland China. Arrived in the UK in my 20s. Actually, I'm writing a book about my life in mainland China and also my life in this country for more than 20 years. And my question for you is that when you approach your first publisher, and how do you approach the publisher, and also how do you eventually persuade the publisher to publish your book? Thank you very much.
In China, it was the other way around. The publisher, the editor came to me. He said, I read some short stories by you, and I think you could write a novel. I said, really? The novel? I was 24, 25. I said, wow, that's it's too big aspiration and ambition for me. I said, yeah, really, I think you can handle it. Then I tried, and so first draft, he made some suggestions, and then that was it. But after I got out of China, and I started immediately to write for the 3 newspapers which have the 副刊, for literature and art, the section. These 3 newspapers at the same time started to publish my short stories or essays. And once they have a literary competition, they encouraged me to join. So the first one, 少女小鱼, got the first prize. And Li An came to me to buy the right for the film. Afterwards, I got 10 more literary prizes in Taiwan. So that was very easy. I didn't need to approach. But in the in the U.S. and then we tried to first to get the agent. The agent first read my novel Fusang after it won novel prize, and she said, no second, not, you can't write with the second person. It's very alienating between you and the narrator and the audience. You have to change it. And by that time, a memoir of a geisha just came out, and she said, "Read the memoir of a geisha. That's the model." That's a.
Actually, I could take it the rest from there. Publishing in English, I had started translating some of her works. It's translated Tianyu, the Celestial Bath. And I had heard around, a friend of hers had published with a feminist nonprofit, but very high quality publisher in San Francisco called Aunt Loot. I showed them that story, and they said, well, this isn't, quite here. There's a main male character in there, and we're more feminist, but keep it coming and show it to us. And then by the time I finished White Snake, she said, you have to come over. We have to talk about a book. And it went from there. Meanwhile, the agent was, wow, that's the model. This is crap. But we were able to show that. And then independently of that, Hyperion became interested through friends. But still, since then, the agent has been key to getting things published in non-Chinese language markets.
It is a real joy sitting in front of you today, my beloved lady novelist today. I'd like to ask you, when you were writing, did you have tears from time to time when you were writing something very emotional? And also, you said that you were a very energetic person earlier on. But I still wondered, because if your characters in different novels are so vivid, and where and how did you find all the inspiration? Did you dream or daydream? Thank you.
Well, I think as a writer, you have to be rationalized. You can't let your emotions go so too how to say, superfluously, because you have to step a little bit away from what you're writing, so you can guarantee the language, the quality of the language, and the rhythm. You have to be in very good control of. Otherwise, you make it too melodrama. That's not a good novel. Good novel should be cool, should be emotionally in control. I write my novels in a very lucid mind. But although when I write something that come back to surprise me, so good, the action that I didn't prepare would happen, then it happened, and it really make me feel like a high. It's like, oh my God, all the writers write to have these moments. Now, these moments will come back to surprise you. The lines you didn't prepare, how come this line so good, so powerful, so right? I always, when I was young, I want to write the most special descriptions. Now, when I get old, I know the most difficult is to get it right, just so accurate. You nothing more, nothing less, but right. So you can't be controlled or possessed by what you're writing. You have to be in control. But afterwards, when I do my proofreading, and I would, be touched by, because now I switched the role as a reader, you know, so I would sometimes feel very touched by what I wrote, and sometimes I even feel like how to say it, liberated by what I wrote. I think this, if a writer can write such a story and such characters dealing with such great matters, you know, ideology, country's fate, and of the great history of our miserable people, miserable Chinese, how much misery we have been through. And I thought, nothing can really bother me, you know. Small personal matters are nothing. Yeah, so I feel liberated by my characters, such a strong and powerful characters. That's my experience.
Hi, Ms. Nicky and Lawrence. I'm a PhD from Warwick, which is located in Coventry. So it's like come a long way here to London. And I watched a lot of your books and interviews before, and 2 points to impress me. And the first one is your ideas about what is the success to a woman. And you said that is like got a happiness family and a career you love and find your true self. And I got a question for this. Have you ever met difficulties dealing with your personal feelings, and how do you deal with this trouble? Because I think this means a lot to female PhDs who are struggling in exhausting writings in a foreign language. And another point is, you said that you are not positive about the communications between so-called Eastern and Western, and because I'm doing a PhD in history, and my topic is about East Asia. So here, I definitely made a problem that not so many people are interested in this topic. So I want to ask, when you were in your earlier years in America, I mean, have you ever you are quite good with your position as a marginer now. Have you ever tried to like immerse yourself into like English culture? As I'm always like struggling in this position that I want to make my my topic seems interesting to other PhDs, but it seems like not that easy. I mean, for PhDs, maybe we cannot comfort ourselves just as a marginer. We have to talk to foreign researchers. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We don't have so long, so perhaps with a 2-part question, perhaps you could pick the half you would most like to answer, and then we'll have time for somebody else.
Okay, so your question is?
No. Maybe you could rephrase the question.
What advice would you give to people struggling outside of their cultural context?
Oh, okay. Yes, of course, yes. Each of my novel, I've been through a heavy self-doubt. Not always you don't. People said you should be very confident about your writing and about what you choose to write. Not really. For an artist, actually you're very fragile within. Anything that, I wrote a very good novel. After it's published, it received very good reviews, and it made me think that I shouldn't have kept it for so long. Back then, I was writing in longhand, so I have this typist. The typist said something, and said, "Oh, why is she so obsessed with that? I don't like her." The major, then that was just killed that novel. I didn't want to get it published. So you see how fragile you are, how unsure of yourself, and you get, this conviction is not easy. Don't think it's not interesting to others. Why? Don't listen to others. Just what you want to do it. That's important. And you don't think anybody else. I don't. So I never listen to anybody.
Okay, we're going to take one more from this side of the room, and then we're going to come to Sonny at the front here.
Hi, it's my pleasure to meet you today, and I have a question regarding your novels, your White Snake and also your Fanghua. It seems like I read them, and I feel some similarity between them. It's like a person always fell in love with another one because of it kind of meet their ideal version. For Xu Qingshan, she kind of fell in love with heroine because of she used to see her dance, and she feel that's her ideal version, and also the Liu Feng love Lin Dingding because of the ideal version, but finally they not get satisfied to finally being together, but more like to purchase their ideal dream. So is that your kind of understanding for love?
But it's very different. Xu Qingshan made Sun Likun fall in love with him. They had a very deep emotional love for each other. She even changed her sexual preference. She used to be a straight woman. Then, because of her, she became a lesbian lover, right? So it's very different. Then, because it's in the chaos of Cultural Revolution, they could love each other as two women. But after the orders are resumed, and seems people to get their ordinary lives back, their love affair had to end because there's no place to be as lovers of lesbian lovers. So that's why they ended it. They don't, but in their heart, they're still loving each other.
Hello, welcome to London, young girling. Look like I'm the first man to ask you a question. I came to know you through a woman, actually. She ran a bookshop which is no longer exists in London. Maybe some people may know. It is called Silver Moon. And this bookshop only sells books written by women. And she introduced me to, I was interested in reading stories about China. And she first introduced me to to Amy Tan, the Joy Luck Club. And then Adeline Yan Ma, Falling Leaves. And I found you through a friend of mine, and I looked it up at Peony Literary Agent, and your name came up. And I read about you. I was very interested in your career, how you went to America to learn English, went to Columbia, Chicago.
What's the question?
Right. My question is, you only wrote one book in English. The rest is in Chinese. The book you wrote in English is called Banquet Bug, or in UK, published as The Uninvited. May I know when is your next book in English, not translated, in English?
I was thinking, when I wrote this, the English novel, The Banquet Bug, I thought I made fun of a Chinese journalist society, and that maybe is too sensitive a topic for publishing in China. So I wrote it with all my irony, and I really got fun out of it, writing it. But the irony is they could publish. They accepted it. And somebody translated it into Chinese, and it was okay. Nobody really criticized me, and only one person said, somehow this language doesn't feel as nice as your other language, the other books. So I said, oh yeah, of course it's translated. Even companies wants to making movie based on this.
Thank you so much. There are about 50 hands in the air.
Yeah, I haven't answered. Yeah, I want to, if there is another a sensitive topic, I'm going to write in English.
And what topic would be not sensitive?
So there are 50 of you with your hands in the air. I'm so sorry. Time is up. You can be furious with me, but I know, it's awful. Just imagine being me and having to look at all you so disappointed. I'm going to ask you to stay in your seats, ladies and gentlemen, because Yengeling has very kindly agreed to head to our second floor where she will be signing some books. She will do this for as long as she can before her next engagement. So can I ask you to cooperate as well as you can with my team and to move yourselves through quickly? I know that you want to ask a million questions. I'm going to ask you to be respectful of everyone else in the queue who would like their turn. And for now, if you can just stay in your seats for a moment longer, could you please join me in thanking Yengeling, Lawrence Walker, and Nicky Harman.